So I am now going to pass it over to Ginny Trainer, our associate curator at the museum and one of the curators for the Paper Routes Women to Watch 2020 exhibition. Hi, Ginny.
Hi, Carolyn. Hi, Annie. And hi, everybody. Thanks again for tuning in. I think this is our first Saturday episode. So we'll see how the attendance does for this. I have a few housekeeping notes of my own, just as an FYI to everyone. After I do my intro, I'm going to stay muted most of the time because I do have my children in the house. And so just to bar any background noise. But I, along with Carolyn, will be monitoring the chat. And so if questions come up for Annie, I will either jump in if it's appropriate or wait until she's concluded her presentation. I am one of the curators of Paper Routes Women to Watch 2020. I'm co-curator along with my colleague Erin Zara. And we are really excited and thankful that this exhibition is happening in person. It's been delayed, obviously, but we will be open to the public on October 8th. The museum is open with lots of safety and security precautions in place. And so for those of you who are able, I really hope you have a chance to see it. I'm really happy to report that by and large, the exhibition will open with everything that we intended to be there. So we, again, thank all of the artists and the committees for their help and, you know, getting, you know, the show must go on. And so it was a true group effort. I wanted to thank, in particular, the Arizona committee spearheaded by the ever resourceful Clara Lovett and her co-chair, Mary Heiss. They put on a wonderful reception for all of the Arizona nominated artists in Scottsdale in January at the beautiful Museum of the West. And it was really an honor for me to be able to attend, to meet these artists, including Annie in person, to hear her speak, which I can tell you is a great treat. So you have that to look forward to in just a minute. That was my last trip before everything shut down, so it holds a very dear place in my heart. I had never been to Scottsdale before, so it was really a pleasure to be able to go for such a great reason. I also wanted to thank Tricia Loescher of the Museum of the West and Julie Sass of the Tucson Museum of Art, who brought the work of Annie and the 5 other amazing artists, Arizona artists, to our attention for consideration for this exhibition. I like to stress that the Women to Watch series it's a very collaborative process. It's not a competition per se, but it's about all of us at NMWA in the committees and then our consulting curators in those regions kind of working together to create an exhibition that's dynamic, that's varied. Really the intent for Arina and myself as the curators of this larger exhibition is to showcase a variety of work in paper, which is this year's theme. And I think when you see the work of all these different artists, it will really be amazing to think that everything's made out of paper. So I'd like to go ahead and introduce Annie. Annie Lopez has been active in the Phoenix art scene since 1982, when she was part of a collective called Movimiento Artístico del Río Salado, or MARS, for Chicano artists. She has received numerous awards and recognitions in Arizona, including the Mayor's Arts Award in 2017, the Governor's Art Award in 2016, the Phoenix Art Museum's Mid-Career Artist Award in 2012. She has also received a Mid-Career Award from the Contemporary Forum of the Phoenix Art Museums, a Purchase Art Award from the Tucson Museum of Art, a project grant from the National Association of Latino Arts and Cultures, and a project grant from New Forms Regional Grants Program. The list goes on and on. Annie's a very accomplished artist and has showcased widely, not only in the Southwest, but also across the country. Today, we're going to be hearing from her directly about her work. She's represented in the exhibition by these wonderful paper dresses that she makes. They're cyanotype prints and she'll talk a little bit about them as well as the other body of her work today. And I think I'm going to leave it at that because it's always better to hear directly from the artist about their process and their intent. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Annie.
Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for joining me. I really appreciate it. And yeah, am I blushing from that introduction? Yes, I am. First off, a quick background about me. I started out very young exhibiting my work. I was a photographer exhibiting black and white and color photographs. They were nice, but after experiencing the art world and the world in general, I felt a need to say more about who I am and where I come from. I had this need to educate and to make a statement. I began to draw on my personal experiences and my family history. I also wanted to find a process that would allow me to make these statements by adding text to the piece. You can add words to regular photographs, but that wasn't what I wanted. I didn't want the text to be an afterthought. I wanted it to be planned. I wanted the piece to revolve around the words. Words are very important to me. So I found Cyanotype, which is a photographic printing process. You use the sun to make the print, and it makes sense to use this process. I live in Arizona, and it's very sunny here. I prefer the sun to a dark room. So let me show you a couple of these. Cyanotype can be used to print a regular photograph. This is made with a negative, but you can use it to it's a blueprint, literally a blueprint. You can also use it to make contact prints, because these are just flowers that were contact printed on the Cyanotype piece. But what it was really important to me was to be able to add text to my pieces, and that just made it so easy. It made it part of the piece rather than just, you know, an afterthought to the piece itself. I started out by making these statements. This was like from my Hispanic series, because people were judging me based solely on my last name, who I am. So I started making this whole thing, exploring what does it mean to be Hispanic? So I started using these words that were cut directly out of magazines that were aimed at Hispanics and Latinas, and taking it completely out of context, but I just started using it in that way. Here's another one. They're just family photographs and the text put together. Another series I started out early on, and again, using Spanish. This is from a series called The Only Spanish I Know. Now, this word means egg. Some people didn't know what that meant, and it was just kind of funny. People were being nice, you know, oh, look at that beautiful photograph, and that word, it must mean something very romantic, but it just means egg. And that's what I loved about it. It was just kind of, but literally the only words I know in Spanish. I didn't grow up learning it. Here's another one, arroz, which means rice. And again, pairing it with a found image. These are not family images in this series. These are found images. They were from glass negatives that I found at a surplus house. So I'm always on the lookout for images and that I can use, or text that I can use. Those words were just kind of meant to showcase the food words that I know, and it just kind of, I don't mind confusing people at the same time. Carolyn, if you could start the slides, we'll talk about those. This is called Sugar Pie, and it's from the series Letters to Andrea. This image was made by combining a negative and a positive. The writing comes from letters my aunt wrote to her best friend, Andrea, in 1940. My aunt and Andrea lived just a mile apart, but they were teenagers at the time, and it was a big mile to these two teenagers. It was rural Phoenix. This is my way of telling family history through the writing in the letter. The man's image is there to make it anyone's story. I want people to relate to the story and hope that it triggers their own family memories. Next image, please. I agree. It's from the series Speak English. As I was growing up, my mother had an accent. Her first language was Spanish, and so was my father's, but he never had an accent. So my mother pronounced words a certain way, and I've heard that pronunciation from other native Spanish speakers. I finally found a book teaching how to pronounce English words and had to use them in my artwork because of the phrases the editor or publisher thought was the most important for these students to say. And this one says, I agree with you that we should speak English all the time. This is a cyanotype print also, but it was toned brown using tannic acid. I just felt that this series needed to be brown. If you can come back to me. So those are prints on watercolor paper. I do a couple of workshops a year, and either I don't get paid for supplies or I don't get paid enough for supplies. And I needed to find another paper that was affordable and accessible for the students and teachers that are often there who want to learn the process. I like to experiment with cyanotype, so I tend to shop for my art supplies in hardware stores and grocery stores. Art supply stores are very intimidating for me, and I don't want to use the same supplies that everyone else uses. So one day in the Hispanic / Latin / ethnic food aisle, I found this tamale paper wrap. This is how you find it in the store, hanging on a little peg. This paper, my family made tamales, but we never used this paper. This was something that you'll see sometimes finished tamales wrapped up in a not restaurant, but in the grocery store in certain aisles. But my family never used this paper, and I was curious about it, and the paper was cheap enough to try to buy a package and to experiment with it. So I printed on it, and it held the print. I kept printing on it. It's like parchment paper, pretty much is what it is. But I wouldn't use parchment paper in my artwork because I don't connect to that in any way. This paper connects to my memories and my culture. And I found this larger size sheet, so I'm not necessarily always using the smaller sheet. I use it to this larger print a lot in my dresses, but I also cut it down small and can use the smaller sizes. It has to be a paper that can stand being in water for a long time. This paper can take all the grease and tamales, so I figured it must be able to take a soaking in water. Could I get the next image, please? This is one of the first pieces that I made on the tamale wrapper paper. It's thin paper, so it is mounted on watercolor paper. You can kind of see how thin the paper is. You can look right through it. It's a statement. It's all run together. It says, every Mexican needs a Chihuahua. And that is an image of my long gone Chihuahua. Next image, please. This is Two Maracas Shy. Again, the individual pieces are mounted on watercolor paper. These are smaller pieces put together. I like the look of the repeating images. You'll see that a lot in my work. And these are family images. Next image, please. In this case, the repeating images are framing the center cyanotype print, which is actually on watercolor paper and then sewn onto the other pieces. The tamale wrapper pieces are all sewn together to make a larger sheet, and then the watercolor paper piece is sewn onto that. This is part of the Winged series, which I started when a close friend died. I drew those wings on a piece of acetate and sandwiched it with the negative as I was printing it, so it came out with the image of the girl with the wings on her. Next image, please. This is my work table in action. Cyanotype is 2 chemicals separately mixed with water. When the 2 are mixed together, they become light sensitive, and then you can paint that solution on paper, cloth, canvas. And this is what the solution looks like as it's painted on the tamale wrapper paper. That's what's painted here. Once it's dry, I can print on it. You can see there's 2 separate solutions, the A solution and B solution, that I put together into one thing. Just use a sponge brush to put it on. It can be dipped into, you can, you know, soak it in the water or whatever, however, or the solution, however you feel like it. Next image, please. I use negatives and positives to print, because until I print it, I never know which one will look better. And sometimes I'll use both in a piece. This is my 30-plus-year-old artist sketchboard. And when I have to replace the scratched plexiglass in my frame pieces, I save the plexiglass to use it on this to do my printing. This is, you just set the pieces with the negatives or the contact printed pieces on top of it, of the solution, close it up tight, hold it tight with some plexiglass, and set it out in the sun for 20-25 minutes. And you bring it inside, rinse off all the solution that didn't see any of the, it wasn't exposed to the sun. I lay it on sheets of newspaper to dry, and then I have a finished print. And if you can come back to me, I will show you. These are the finished prints. And the paper stays, it doesn't rip. It's pretty tough paper, considering it's just paper. It will eventually break down if you crumble it enough, because again, it is paper. These are my negatives and positives. It's just acetate that I make up and put on it. This is actually going to be my next dress. So those are my prints. And that's why I've learned to do on the tamale wrapper paper. So a few years back, I was awarded a solo exhibition at the Phoenix Art Museum, which is great, but it was in a lobby with a lot of windows and not a lot of wall space. And that's a real problem for artists who only make 2-dimensional pieces. I considered a lot of things like installation, whatever, but it just, nothing was coming to me. So as I was thinking about it, I remembered that I was going to try to make prayer flags for a workshop, and using that tamale wrapper paper. So I took that paper, I, you know, folded over the end, sewed a casing for a cord, so, you know, the cord could go right through there, and the stitching held for me. So that popped the idea in my head that I could start, you know, try a new approach with my prints. I've been sewing since I was 8 years old. And a comment that I made about sewing my troubles into a dress led me to this. If you can go to the next slide. This was my solution. I went from 2D to 3D. My cyanotype prints became sculptural. And I began a series of dresses that each told a story from my life or family history. Once I knew what I was going to do, I decided the supplies I needed I would find by chance, secondhand. So I searched for dress patterns and sewing notions in thrift stores and estate sales, and you know, put my stories together, right? So I knew which subject they would each talk about. Each one is a separate story. These are full-size dresses with zippers and snaps, and they're sewn together just like you would sew fabric. Each dress took a minimum of 20 prints on the paper. Not every print works, so I always end up making at least twice as many prints as make it in the dress. Next slide, please. My father had Alzheimer's, and while I cared for him, I spent every spare minute reading medical textbooks, helping to find a cure. That didn't happen, but the text ended up in my dress, as well as an x-ray of my dislocated elbow. So even though a lot of the subject matter is serious, I try to keep my sense of humor about what the story is all about. Try to slip that in. Next slide, please. This is called Remnants of Long-Term Memory. And this one is also about my father's Alzheimer's, but from his point of view. He was a business owner, and in his final year, to keep him busy, I would give him a pen and paper and ask him to write up an invoice for that customer. The images in the dress are what he wrote and what he drew. He used to draw little sketches for his kids all the time, cars and cowboys and stuff. This one is a new one. It looks like a dog wearing a sweater. Some people said it looks like a dog in a shopping cart, so I'm not quite sure what it is, but this is what he drew for us, and it's very special to me. And also, there's writing on it that says A-N-E-E, so I believe that he remembered me and that my name is Annie, because I was the one taking care of him. So again, this dress has zippers and you know, metal hooks and eyes. It's sewn together just like a regular dress, but you see, as you sew the paper together, it kind of gives it a shape. So the shape holds on the dress. The paper helps it to stay wide if it's a wide skirt, or however the shape is, it just holds because it's paper. Next slide, please. This dress is titled Memorial. It's the first dress I made mostly of images rather than text. There is some text on it, but it's mostly images. It was made for a Day of the Dead exhibition. And so the dress has images of friends and family members that have died. You see, it's a simple spaghetti strap sort of dress. And again, holds its shape. It's got a big skirt on it. Next slide, please. This is a paper version of an outer carrier / body armor that would be worn by police officers. It is titled, I Wish I Were Bulletproof. And those are photos of me on it. This has Velcro closures and a badge tab, and the same pockets you would find on an outer carrier. It's my symbolic shell protection. In my other life, I decided once I started learning how to, or once I started making these dresses as part of my artwork, I've always worked, but I found a job doing alterations, working as a seamstress, and in a place that serves police officers, public safety people, and that has just become very interesting on, in many sort of directions, and being around those people all day. And but again, it affected me in this, because I used to make the vests quite a bit, or alter the vest quite a bit. That's why I made this one. It just made me feel like I needed to make one, but it is made exactly like an outer carrier would be. Next slide, please. This is my most recent dress. I just finished this 2 weeks ago. It's titled Relative Alien. The skirt of the dress has prints of my maternal grandparents' alien laborers identification cards that they were issued when they came into America from Mexico in 1919. the top of the dress has language from a law that was enacted in Arizona 10 years ago. The law has a number, but everybody around here called it the show us your papers law, because that's basically what it was. It was enacted to harass and frighten anyone with brown skin. The law was ridiculous. Most of it was shot down by the courts, but it used the same offensive word alien in the language of the law. And it kind of makes me feel like my grandparents came from outer space. You can come back to me now. In a lot of my pieces, I try to educate about Arizona history as it relates to my family and how long we've been here. One of my pieces in the Paper Roots exhibit is made with images of the things that, a lot of things that I grew up with and love. You know, a restaurant that my father would take us to every Sunday after church, and the things I did as a teenager, my first camera that I actually paid for, you know, the play Annie, that sort of thing, just things that I grew up with. Another dress is about a dear friend and his life as a chemist. And the third is about how I tried and tried, but like I said before, I never learned to speak Spanish, which was a great shame for my parents, but I never learned it. Yeah, so those are my images, and that's a little bit about me. You know, I want to make sure that I do thank the Arizona Committee for choosing me. I'm so grateful, and thanks to the museum staff for guiding me through all this. So I'll hand it back to you guys.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Annie. Your work is so, it's so incredibly poignant, but I see in this undercurrent, excuse me, of humor that's often very subtle. And so I was wondering if you could just talk about the use of humor in your work and why you use it.
Yeah, I've just always tried to do that because they are so serious, or these are really serious subjects. But I've just always felt like, you know, if you can't laugh about it, you're gonna, you know, you're gonna cry about it. That's all there is to it. It's one way or the other. And I feel like by even presenting this type of subject, I'm educating. I'm just, you know, and also I'm helping other people to relate to the story. I hear a lot about it, but yeah, I mean, humor is a defense mechanism also, and I've always used it in that way. It's kind of like, I will make fun of myself first so you can't, you know, or it's like, let me do it first and I'll take care of that. But I try to do that each time. I just can't, you know, it's really hard for me to be super, super serious. But so that's why it always makes its way in to the artwork.
I love it. I always appreciate a little bit of humor thrown in. It's you know, in particular when you're dealing with subject matter that is so serious and weighty as you're doing, and so personal. I mean, it's just a wonderful aspect, I think, of your personality that comes through in that way. We have a few questions. Most of them are about process, which is not surprising because I think people are just so intrigued by how you make these creations. So one of the questions we have is about your use of images and words. And when you're making a piece that incorporates both, what do you start with? Do you start with images first or the words?
It depends on the series. It's usually the story. Well, I shouldn't say that because it depends on the series, but a lot of times there may be an image that I find and I think I have to do something that, or it reminds me of something. That's especially if it's a family photograph. The found photographs don't happen just coming up with a story. The found photographs usually meet some other sort of criteria for a different series, but mostly what everything starts with is my idea about a particular experience, a particular story that I heard as I was growing up from, you know, family members just telling me, you know, this is what happened. It may be bad, but that once I get that story and I think about it, I write it down, jot notes about it. I may find a photograph that fits it, but a lot of the writing goes in first, what it's about. The dresses are a lot of, yeah, I'll know what's going on first. I'm the family historian, so I'm the one that keeps all the paperwork. I have all the photo albums. So it may just be flipping through photo albums, finding something that I like, something that triggers a story, and that's usually what it is. Something is triggered. But I have notebooks everywhere that have these just snippets of what I was thinking about. This has to be a piece. This has to be a dress. So it's kind of written down in some way that this is what I need to think about. So everything just kind of stews back in my head for a while. It's written down. Sometimes I'll lose it for a couple of months and come back to it. But I never know. It's just like with my grandparents' alien laborers identification cards. There's just so much that could come out of this. I did make a piece out of a storybook piece, which is a photograph piece with my grandmother's card on it and a little story underneath it, because it just felt like it was just important enough that I need to keep using this. But yeah, this matching up their images, which I got a little piece of it here, with a story, you know, and especially with this new one, pairing it up with the law, the language from this law that just keeps talking about aliens, aliens, aliens. And it just, because someone had I kept seeing reminders in the news that it's 10 years, it's an anniversary of this law. And so looking at it and seeing the word alien in it just reminded me about my grandparents' alien cards and, you know, and what they went through in order to, you know, to be here, to come into Arizona and to stay here and raise our kids here, and, you know, and all the rest of us.
Yeah, and as you said yourself earlier, words are important. Words matter.
They do.
And yeah, unfortunately, I don't think the use of that word was probably an accident.
Right.
Law.
Right.
Yeah.
Even though, you know, it's like a lot of Arizona used to be Mexico. So it's confusing why people think that, you know, that we should be so separate.
Right.
And there was a piece that I made that was part of that show that you saw in the lobby. It was covered in my birth certificate and certificates from things that I did in grade school, like Campfire Girls and my Catholic school certificates and stuff like that, proving that I had been here longer than a lot of the people who wrote this law and who were champions of this law. And it's like, you just got here. I've been here all this time, and my family's been here all this time. And, you know, so why are you, you know, so that's why it just kind of took on that I should teach this Arizona history in whatever I'm making, you know, just throw a little bit in that every now and then.
Yeah. Yeah. We also have a couple of questions about the color of your dresses. And so I think wanted to reiterate for everybody that rich blue that we're seeing is really the result of the chemical reaction that's happening. So it's not a dye per se. Is that correct?
Right. It is two chemicals. One of them is potassium ferrocyanide. The other one is ferric ammonium citrate, and they're mixed with water. When you put the solutions together, they become light sensitive. And they become that yellow color that I showed on my work table, that yellow color. When you put it out in the sun, it starts turning green, and then it starts turning gray, and then it turns to the blue. Mm-hmm. But you don't see the blue until you bring it inside and start washing off all the stuff that wasn't exposed to the sun, and that's what leaves that color. But yeah, it's a chemical reaction. This is a process that's been around since 1840, and what I learned by people are finally discovering Cyanotype, that this is a process that people would use to print their photographs at home a long, long time ago. And, you know, I don't, there's no Cyanotype photographs in my family albums because that, you know, didn't go that far, but I'm really grateful that for some reason, as poor as my people were, they still took photographs and still had something there for me to know, you know, what they went through.
Mm-hmm. And if you were to kind of interrupt that process and take the piece in before it had turned blue, would the image hold still?
It would, but it would be very, very light. I don't know if I have a piece that might be, well, yeah, you'd see the difference between this kind of blue and this kind of blue. So I like to leave it out for 25 minutes. I mean, even though we have the best sun here, there's some people that, you know, I know a long, long time ago, I was doing 15 minutes and, but I really like the richness of the deep blue. It's all, you know, it's a science, but it's not an exact science. So it, you know, you never know from batch to batch how it's going to be, how good the color is going to be. And you never know from batch to batch if you're painting it on correctly, if you might have, you know, missed a spot in the middle or something. I try to hold it up and see if I've got it all, but you never know. It's just, so it's something that you can't just do it and that's it. It's done, right, and it's perfect. You have to, you know, I have to do at least twice as many as make it in the dresses. I've done up to some, you know, the larger dresses, like one of the ones that's at the museum show. It's probably got 50 pieces in it. So you have to make a lot of prints, and that's not these smaller prints. That's on the larger paper, the full size paper that I've been using. So wow, you know, like there's a lot of these. So it's a lot of printing, but I love it.
And how long on average would you say each dress takes from, you know, the printing process and the sewing? And
it takes so long. From the first thought, you know, I can't even count how long that's going to take, because I have to, you know, come up with what I'm going to do. Then I come up with the image and text that's going to go with it. I got to make my negatives or positives to go with it. And then, because I work full time, it's like coming home at night and painting on some of the Cyanotype, you know, letting it dry, putting it away. The next night, painting more on there, you know, so I've got a big load of sensitized paper ready for me on the weekend. And I print between, you know, stretch it out sometimes 10:30 to about 2:30. Those are my hours that I can print when the sun is more directly down, because any earlier or later, the sun's more at an angle, and it can even like get underneath that negative, and you know, and so give you a print that's not so clear. The type won't be so clear. So it's just printing and printing. It's usually, depending on the piece, because then I have to put it all together and think about how many pieces it's going to take to make a dress. And it, you know, I can show you a pile here that I have. This is going to go into the next dress, and then I probably have to do more. But this next dress, it's going to, you know, I have to lay out the pieces, find the pattern. That's another thing, is I have to find the pattern. And those were all, you know, I have hundreds of patterns sitting around here now, but when I started the process, it was like, you know, the search, finding all these patterns. And they had to fall within particular years for me, because that was very important. And they were like, they were supposed to, I was born in the late 50s. So it's like, so I would take the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Those decades, if I found patterns from those times and they looked like you know, that I liked them. And some of them were even patterns that I had actually made as a kid, you know, wore these dresses and which is really cool, you know. But here I go, I'm finding them and I'm making dresses out of them, making artwork out of them. But So that's part of the process. So it may be like, 6 months that it's going to take to do this whole thing. Because once I have the prints, I have to, make sure that I'll just set them out on the floor and see if the pattern pieces will cover it, or how I can make it into a particular pattern with the pieces. And then sewing them together. And sometimes that process too is very difficult. The most difficult part of that dress is going to be the zipper, because you're working on paper, and that's the part where I have to like drop it and walk away and not, yell at the piece and then walk back. And, it's like, okay, you're going to work out for me. This is how I can do it. My father was a auto upholsterer. I never sewed with him, but this is what he did. And he used to tell me all the time that he would dream about the pieces, that he couldn't figure out how to put these things together. And I find myself doing the same thing now, that I'll dream about the pieces and try to find a solution in my dreams of how am I going to get that zipper in, or how am I going to angle this piece? But I have to also adapt the patterns to the paper, because the paper doesn't stretch. And so I may use pieces from another pattern, or adapt the pattern that I have in order to make it fit. So it's a very long process, but at least a solid 2 months working on it. It's itself, the printing, and and then the sewing.
Yeah. It's interesting that you are focused on those decades, which I think in the past you've said, kind of correspond to your, your growing up. So the 60s and the 70s, because paper dresses were all the rage in the mid 60s,
right?
65, 66. And so, did you have that at all consciously in your minds when you started making these?
No, I didn't even think about that, which I should have, but it's not something that I would have ever been able to order. I can imagine my older sister might have thought about that, but I didn't really learn about them until I started showing my dresses. And then I heard from a few women who said, that they actually had a paper dress. And of course I heard the story about wearing a paper dress out in public, and then it started raining. And those kind of dresses were just paper. They were just regular paper, and so they would not stand up to water. But this dress, if I could actually wear these dresses, they would take a rainstorm fine, because they are soaked in paper. And when I have to manipulate parts of it, like the newest dress has a tie behind the neck. It's a halter dress and it ties around the neck, or there's some that have ties around the waist. In order to make it tie for me, I spray it with water, and that way I can make the knots, and then it holds. But yeah, I love that thought. I just, I love that era, the mini dresses and stuff. And me, I was always, I was looking at magazines when I was, when I was a kid, and always imagining that, that I would have these kind of clothes, but I never did. And so that's, but I didn't even think about that until later on, after I started showing them and people were telling me about the paper dresses.
Yeah, well, and I think yours are so much more complex than those ever were. I mean, from what I've seen, they're really just kind of simple A-line.
Right, very simple
dresses.
Sleeveless usually, and very simple dresses.
Yeah. Well, before we let you go, I just wanted to note that we do have a comment/question from Julie Sass, who's one of the consulting curators, Arizona curators, on this project. And I think it would be a nice kind of closing comment, and then your answer to her question. She says, knowing and loving your work for 3 decades, I know you have struggled to get your work noticed over the years. How does it feel to be a part of this prestigious exhibition and to get your work out to a national audience?
Okay, Julie, you're making me cry. That's all I can say. It's been a really hard process to get to this point, and that's why at the beginning, why I changed up what I was doing, because people were judging me And it was really hurtful. I was being judged based on my last name and based on the color of my skin. And without seeing my artwork, people would actually hold their hands out and say, no, have you tried the Mexican Museum? So, you know, I went through a lot of that early on in my career, which really was, you know, it was so hurtful. And, you know, things got a lot better, you know, maybe 10 years later than that. But it's just, I'm really grateful that people are starting to recognize cyanotype as an art, or that, you know, the way I use it, because I did not only from, when I started also, photography wasn't considered an art, which is weird. And then photographers didn't consider cyanotype photography. And so what I do is a printing process, and then printers say, well, no, you're not a printer, you're a photographer. So it's like, I can't win either way.
Yeah.
But I really, you know, I'm an artist. I'm going to keep making this stuff, you know, regardless if people are going to pay attention to it or not. But I really appreciate the encouragement that I've gotten over the years. There have been a lot of women who have gone out of their way to tell me that they like what I do, that I should keep making it. And there's been a lot of curators in my life, including Julie. And also a shout out to Sarah Cochran, who was at the Phoenix Art Museum. I believe she's in New York now. People who have actually encouraged me. And that's, you know, that's the only way that I could really manage to keep going. But it's like, this means everything to me. I've been a member of the museum for, like, I don't know, as long as it's been around. It's been a long, long time. And, you know, and it's just because it's just, for me, it's a matter of support. This is such an important museum. And so I'm going to support it any way I can. And I never even imagined, never entered my mind that I would ever show there. And, you know, and I'm hoping that I can actually go there and see the museum. But this is like, but it is everything to me. It's just, it is really a big deal. And, you know, I kind of feel like I'm not worthy of it. That's just the way I am. And so, yeah, Julie, thanks for making me cry.
Well, we are completely honored to have your work in the exhibition. It's amazing. You are an artist who has really, you know, you have your vision and you stay with it, and you're not, you know, you're not willing to compromise it. And I think that kind of steadfastness is really respectable. And I'm so glad to be able to bring your work to our audience at NMWA. And I really, really hope, yes, that someday you'll be able to come to the museum. Who knows what the next few months hold in store for all of us, but I remain hopeful. And I do lament the fact that we won't be able to gather for an opening reception the way that we usually do, because that's one of my all-time favorite events at the museum, is getting all of the women to watch artists together who usually have this thing in common, in this case, paper, right, and being able to meet each other and talk about your practice. But these studio tours have been a wonderful window into the artist's practice and your lives and your experiences. And so really thank you from the bottom of my heart for participating and for making yourself available to us.
Well, thank you. Thank you for doing this. And again, thank you to the Arizona Committee. You guys are tops, man. You guys are the best. And and you and Carolyn and Oren, it's like, I appreciate you guys guiding me through this process also. And your encouragement also, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, I think everyone's emotional now. So
I know.
great way to end this tour. Again, you know, I'll just second what Jenny said. Thank you so much, Annie. for your support of NMWA and now getting, us getting to show your work. You are our mission in person. So we thank you so much for taking the time and showing us your amazing work and hearing directly from you, especially in this time and everything that's going on for all these months is really inspirational. So thank you so much for that. And we can't wait to see those dresses in person. I know, I think you're going to have a lot of new fans after this. So we thank you. Yes. And thank you, Jenny, for leading us and
My pleasure.
for everything you do. And again, a special thank you. I will also shout out the Arizona Committee for everything and bringing it to us and sponsoring her to get her work to Washington. So we thank you. And all the committees that are working with Women to Watch and all that you've done for all these years. Thank you so much.